The company Carbon Black, the presenter Sam Linford.
Be with you. Really hurt me, baby. Really hurt me, baby. How can I have a day without a night? You're the book that I have opened, and now I gotta know much more.
Well, I like the music. That's a great start to the
indeed.
conversation. And you're a man who likes going downhill fast. That doesn't mean to say you're going to crash into the ground. Explain.
Yeah, I really do quite enjoy some downhill mountain biking in my time off. So,
Have you been doing this a long time?
Yeah, since I was a youngster. It used to be a lot easier to get back up the hill in those days, but not so much now.
It looks pretty scary to me sometimes. I see pretty extreme people doing amazing things.
Well, I think you get pretty used to it, like all of these different types of activities. But yeah, ultimately, you can get hurt. It can be dangerous. I know mountain biking's pretty popular in Slovenia as well. I've got some good friends that live here, do a lot of biking. There's some good hills, right? We can see them right outside the hotel.
And, do you actually research where you're going to do it? I mean, you know the route before you go down, so you know with which bits you can't. I mean, you could go down a path that leads to something that's not easily...
Well, that's happened before. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We do take some time, but I mean, there's not a huge number of places to do it in the UK, too much. I know them well now, but typically Surrey Hills in the UK and in Wales, there's some great riding.
Yeah, because you live just west of London, basically.
That's right,
Reading,
I do, yes, yeah.
And it's good fun there? I mean, you do it in the rain? Because we probably have a little more...
Well, I'd prefer not to do it in the rain, but I mean, that's the UK, right? It rains a lot.
That's behind my question. Okay, I gather we've sorted out, hopefully to your satisfaction, a slight change of the technical way we're doing it. Please, the floor is yours, Sam.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got some slides. So, first of all, I'd just like to extend a big thanks to the Real Security team for arranging this event. I'm really impressed. It's the first time we've actually been here as Carbon Black. Last night I saw a huge number of friendly faces that I've known for many years. It's also great to see some of our current customers here as well, hopefully in the audience. But thank you very much for everyone coming along. I'd also want to extend a really big thanks to my colleagues, Florian and Lorenzo, who have actually helped me with this event, helped speaking with our prospects and partners on our stand, and also for Florian presenting yesterday. I gather that was quite a nice attendance, so thanks guys, much appreciated. So we're going to talk about some of the things that I guess close to Carbon Black's heart. The risk guys told me that I can't talk about technology, I can't talk about our products, which is fair enough. And I'm going to talk more about, how we see we should work as security professionals on a daily basis. So we're going to cover the modern threatscape, and I know this has been covered off a few times in some presentations over the last couple of days. But I'm going to just go over that again, reiterate it from, I guess, Carbon Black's perspective. I'm going to talk about the defender's advantage. We all have an advantage that we can leverage to stop the bad guys from getting into our environment and causing problems. And I'm also going to talk about how we tip those scales back in our favor. How do we win the war against cyber attacks? Carbon Black's vision is a world safer from cyber attacks, and that's what our technology does. But let's talk a bit about our vision and the modern threatscape. So we all know that there's numerous attacks released on weekly and daily basis nowadays. And they can be all sorts of attacks from Dark Hotel, which is actually quite an old one now, but it's very relevant in terms of stealing, for example, individuals' information on hotel networks, and I noticed that this hotel has no security on its network, which I always find a little bit concerning. There's mercenary groups out there with, very new and advanced APT-based threats, for example, White Company, and state-sponsored groups. These are criminal operations. These are groups there to steal financial information, to target individuals upon request. Maybe, for example, very senior representatives within enterprises and governments. And these are state-sponsored groups targeting our governments, our militaries, ultimately to give kind of a geopolitical and economic advantage for counterintelligence and operations. So this is really important stuff. So, we see the compliance landscape evolving, and we've got Matt Damon here, the Martian, and throughout his journey when he lands on Mars, he faces a number of huge hurdles that he has to overcome. Things that change his life from minute to minute, from day to day, and I think that's exactly the same as our threat landscape and the challenges that we have, but also. It's not just about what the bad guys are doing in our daily lives, in the work that we do. It's about what we have to adhere to. Compliance, requirements, regulations, standards, transparency, rules. It's about GDPR and PCI DSS, and in South Africa, the POPI regulation. And, our daily jobs require us to adhere to all of these things and spend our time trying to stop the bad guys getting into our infrastructure and causing problems. So we have this constant change, and we also have all of the attackers. So we have to defend our infrastructure. We must do that, and we must do it proactively. Attackers are very fast and very sophisticated. They're using tools nowadays that are very much automated, that allow them to breach our networks, breach our infrastructure, and cause damage, steal information, steal credentials very, very quickly. So that makes their life nice and easy, but our life is absolutely not so easy. As a defender, as a security expert, we don't just have, again, this job of trying to defend our network. That's not our only job. We have to do projects. We have to look for new technologies. We might be looking at more than one incident at any one time. We might be trying to understand how to close the gaps within our environment, whilst also trying to decide when I would like to book a holiday and going through the process of, entering my holiday time on my personnel system. So we're really busy people in our daily lives, in our daily working lives. And the attackers are getting faster. Common Trojans, like Emotet has nation-state tools baked into it. These are tools produced by, ultimately, some governments that make attacking really fast and really easy. So we need process, and we need technology that provides less complexity, not more, okay? It's really important. According to the Carbon Black latest threat report, and we put out these threat reports fairly regularly, half of all incident response engagements, so an engagement in terms of you trying to understand an indication of compromise maybe, now involve instances of counter incident response. So whilst you're trying to uncover what's happened and stop the attacker from maybe moving from one phase to another along the kill chain, they're also working against you at the same time, counter incident response. So basically what this slide is saying is that we really don't have that much time, and we have to operate very efficiently to ensure that we're doing our jobs properly. And then we've got the complexity piece. I was looking just the other day online at a diagram on a website that showed all of the security vendors that are out there producing technology for prevention, for endpoint security, for authentication, for encryption, whatever it might be. And this one slide was filled with probably 150 different vendors producing technology. So the choice of buying technology is huge, and it's a minefield, and it's complex. So, you've got to think about all of the possible combinations of vendors that are out there producing technology, and then pick your tools that are very specific to your organization to defend properly. So, the tools that we decide to use within our infrastructure are our ecosystem. And these tools are the pieces of technology that provide real outcomes, positive or negative outcomes. So as defenders, we choose our tool sets to meet threats that face our specific environment. As a financial organization or a government, you would very much require different types of tool sets to defend against the types of attacks that you will be seeing. So you have to choose your tool sets wisely. And then, something that we know very well in Carbon Black is that customers that utilize our technology spend a lot of time understanding and learning how to use that technology efficiently and appropriately. And these effective teams use the smallest numbers of tools that they can possibly have, and they take their time to understand. And I think, I definitely see a lot of prospects and customers that we work with today trying to implement too many tools at the same time without sitting down and actually thinking, what do I really need? What's going to be most effective? So we have a very complex environment today. And this is kind of where we start to talk about what's our advantage. What can we do as defenders, as security experts, to be prepared, to know our environment properly? So first and foremost, and absolutely most importantly, who knows our infrastructure and the tools that we have in place better than yourself looking after that environment? You must know your terrain, your landscape. And I think we absolutely, we fail to act upon the knowledge that we have about our environments. A good example of understanding our landscape, and it's a little bit of a different example, but I live out in the countryside in the UK, and lots of fields and trees, very much like around this part of the world. And in World War II, the UK built thousands and thousands of what we call pillboxes, which are effectively big concrete bunkers that the soldiers could sit in and point their guns out very, very small windows. And they knew their locations. They knew their surroundings, where potential attackers could be coming from, and how to de-weaponize those attackers from being able to complete their task. And just in the same way, we have to know our threat landscape. We have to know everything about our environment properly, not just our perimeter, but also which technology we're using and how to use it. And I don't think I can emphasize that enough times. So know your terrain. And you need to know your assets. Like I just said, you need to know your technology. We're acquiring technology, and we're failing to learn it and understand it. So very, very important. If we don't have the right technology in place, and also if we don't know how to use the right technology, the adversary today can hide in darkness. They can hide within your infrastructure. You won't even know they're there. I had a new prospect customer contact me just very recently, and they said, actually, we don't know if we've been breached or not, but we want to do something about that right now. And that's what I firmly believe everyone should be doing in this industry. Let's turn the lights on so we can actually see what's happening within our environment. Let's prevent what we can prevent by thinking like the Spartans, okay? So we can all use numerous pieces of technology. We can use, for example, good cyber hygiene. Let's look after our environment properly. Let's patch properly. When a new patch is released, let's test it, let's implement it. Let's put in application control and firewalls. Let's put two-factor authentication in and some sort of cryptography to encrypt our disks and good backup systems. But ultimately, with all of that stuff in place, with all of that prevention and perimeter security, there's still issues there. You think like a Spartan. They didn't wear plate mail or armor on their bodies. They just had a very large shield. They didn't have any armor on their legs because they didn't consider that to be an important place. If they were struck by a weapon, it wouldn't necessarily kill them. They thinned out their attack surface and ultimately chose their place to fight. And their place to fight was obviously on a battlefield. Your place to fight is inside your environment. And you're knowing that place. So the attackers will figure out where your weaknesses are, regardless of what prevention technology you have in place, because there is no prevention in terms of automated threat prevention, as an example, that will be 100% foolproof and will absolutely stop the attack. So you have to have something else in place to be able to, detect and defend post someone coming round. And, obviously the Spartans, from a Hollywood perspective, there was an insider attack and they were still taken down because someone got round their perimeter defenses. So prevent everything you can. Absolutely, it's really important. But do think like the Spartans thought. And then, when you can't prevent something, you've got to detect it. You've got to spend the time looking within your infrastructure and understanding and detecting. So detect what you can't prevent, okay? You will never stop 100% of attacks in terms of prevention. But you can set yourself up now to have the visibility that you need within your environment to detect what is missed by your perimeter from a prevention perspective. So you have to plan for this. And we still see far too many organizations, enterprises, governments, for example, the NHS in the UK, when WannaCry hit them, being hit by these attacks because they didn't do something beforehand. And everyone kind of thinks, well, it won't happen to me. I'm not worried about that. Are these attackers actually real? Well, you know they're real when you actually get hit. And, we see that all the time. Carbon Black does, or works with customers on incident response, right? And we see this kind of thing all the time. The attackers are absolutely real. So plan for this. Build something before it happens. And another thing we need to do is actually switch our mindsets. It's really important to change our mindset. Think about what you would do if you knew the attackers were already within your network. What would you implement in terms of technology if you knew they were already in there? Because that's what you should be doing before you know that. And attackers today, with the tools that they have available to them, look just like insiders. They look just like yourselves managing your environments from an administrative perspective. So they know how to live off the land. They know how to use the tools and evade prevention capabilities. Nation-state leaks like shadow brokers and Vault 7 have given even ordinary cyber criminals the ability to look like approved processes and accounts within your system. So how do you find those guys? How do you know what they're doing? To address the modern threats that we're seeing, we've got to make this shift in our mindsets, as I said before on the last slide. Really important. Think like they're already there, and that will give you a much better place to be when they actually do come. So, while these techniques, these tactics, and the procedures that the cyber criminals are using, the threat actors, it's giving them a massive advantage. Defenders must also seize their inherent advantages, and some of those we've already spoken about. We have to disrupt the attackers. We can't prevent against everything. We have to be disruptive and make their life much more difficult. So, huge numbers of technology out there, different types of technology in the security world. They begin at the end of the kill chain, at the actions and objectives. And you can see from this slide that the kill chain's pretty large. There's a number of things going on here. There's a number of steps that the attackers have to take and walk through to compromise your environment. And my question is, why can't we drive the visibility of the actions, the tactics, the techniques, the procedures that these attackers are using up the kill chain? Why can't we force them to have to work much harder at the left-hand side? Let's start at reconnaissance, weaponization. Let's stop them at these points before they get to actions and objectives. And there is technology available today that can help you do that. So we must deploy the right technology with the right visibility to detect, to show us the indications of compromise that a bad guy is within our environment. We've got to make them work harder. We've got to make them work really hard to get to their goal. At the moment, we don't. Once they're in, once they're past our prevention, most of us, most organizations, don't make the attacker do anything. So, if they're determined enough, they will get in. And that's the point where you've got to really take action and fight for your security. We've got to disrupt them in that kill chain and break that chain before they move forwards. So we get to the point of really, how do we tip the scales? How do we make this change? How do we change our mindsets, the way in which we work, the tools that we've got within our environment to ultimately implement technology that works for us, for our industry, for our vertical, governments, finance, healthcare, whatever it might be. There's lots of helpful bodies out there that do different types of tests, that understand the attackers, that produce information to help us. And you've heard about MITRE. I've heard a number of presenters speak about MITRE attack framework. And yes, we might be getting a little bit tired of hearing about that, but the reality is what MITRE has done is put names to the types of tactics and techniques that these attackers are using to breach our environments. And those names help us. They really help us stop the bad guys when it comes to threat intelligence and indications of compromise and understanding. The attack framework has put names to these adversaries. It's put names to behavior, and it's going to assist us moving forwards. And Carbon Black has absolutely taken on board all of this information that's come out of MITRE, and we're already very much using it in our technologies today. Let's see if we can get to the next slide. Okay, so with the technologies available for visibility, for detection, for indication of compromise, for threat intelligence, for threat hunting, these technologies give us the ability to have not just one point of stopping the attacker, this prevention at the perimeter, this endpoint security that's antivirus. We've got lots of points that we can stop this attacker along the kill chain. And this is just an example. So with the available technology we have, we can see what the attacker's doing. We can see, they're writing a file to a disk, they're making external network connections, they're creating a scheduled task. And all of these pieces of the puzzle, when you link them together and you look at them in a flow, in a stream of activity, might provide an indication of compromise. But each point along the way shows you that something maybe is unusual going on, and you should be taking note of that. And the attack framework, again, as I mentioned, puts names to these different techniques. So actually you get much more than one shot at stopping an attack. You've got many along the way, which will tell you there's a problem. I think it's very important to say that you only have to be one step ahead. So one step ahead is just having the knowledge, the understanding of your landscape, the right tools in place to be that one step ahead. Always be prepared. This is a very United States-centric photo here of a US firefighter going into a huge fire. But what these guys do, from example, a bush perspective, when their green land set on fire, and we've seen that a lot in in the States recently over past months and last summer is that they organise their firefighters to be in the right place at the right time before something happens. So they know potentially we could get a bushfire in this specific area. Let's put a number of firefighters here. Let's lay tools around the area that we can use to beat that fire before it starts. So when it does start, inevitably, they can put that flame out. And so the question I ask you is, are you actually going to prepare for the fire now to be able to put it out much more quickly when it does happen? Okay. Do you have backups? Do you have tested restores? Do you test your restores? All of this type of thing can be done right now. There's no real cost to backups and restoring. It's just something you should test to make sure it works. The activity doesn't require you to do very much at all, but it's just one thing that you can put in place to stop an attack, to put out the fire if it happens. So if you're short of money on spending on security, look at the things you can do that will make you much more prepared when it does happen so you can recover from that attack. An attacker only has to be successful once, but the defender has to stop 100% of attacks. We've got this knowledge and understanding, and you may have heard the phrase or the term deep defense or defense in depth. And what this really means is layering lots of technology side by side and on top of each other to prevent some sort of attack from the outside. And we look at this castle, and from a castle-type perspective, you've got the big stone brick walls, you've got the archers on top of the turrets, you've got a moat, you've got a drawbridge. And they're all prevention techniques to stop the bad guy getting in. And that's great. You need all of that stuff. But there's also other ways to perform this prevention. Rather than buying one-off products to, build a wall, a more strategic view would look at each point along the kill chain. What technology do I need to implement to stop the attacker at a specific point along the kill chain? That's really important to think about, because you might buy technology that doesn't necessarily stop each point along the kill chain. It might not be a lot of use to you today. Align these technologies to disrupt. Disruption is absolutely the key, right? You've got to disrupt these bad guys. And disruption starts at reconnaissance, but it moves through the kill chain, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, deployment of malwares and ransomwares. Ransomware prevention. We should all have that. And then, once the attacker is in, they should have to be 100% perfect, and they don't have to be that today. They don't have to be perfect to complete their goal. We need to make them perfect. We need to make them work really hard. The harder we make the attacker work, the more frustrated they will become, and the more likely they are to actually turn around and go somewhere else and try and knock on someone else's door. It's a $1 trillion business economy on the dark web, according to the WTO. And we have to disrupt this economy. We have to make their return on investment much worse, because right now their return on investment is incredible. The money that attackers are making from ransomware, from stealing identities, from stealing money from bank accounts, whatever it might be, it's vast. So we all have a job to do as a security expert to make their life harder. And we spoke about deep defense on the previous slide. Forget about deep defense. Start thinking about deep disruption, not deep defense. Yes, we have to have perimeter technologies. Yes, we have to have automated threat prevention on the endpoint. But we need to disrupt. We need to understand how to work. So, key takeaways from my presentation: always be prepared. We do have the advantage. You always have to remember we have the advantage to be able to stop this bad guy. Deep disruption. I've said it a number of times. We have to disrupt. That will help us win this war against the cyber criminals. and we'll never be 100%, but we will be able to slow down their progress and make it much harder for them. So that's my presentation today. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me speaking. If you want to talk any further about carbon black and the solutions that we offer, we have a little stand just out there. We've got some good technical knowledge with us, so we can absolutely have a conversation. But thank you very much. It's much appreciated.